And I hope that it has come together right and makes sense because, as you know, sometimes things make sense up here that don't always make sense out here. So, one of the things that we've been, and the music and all the things have been really good for today because of how I'm talking about this passage or some of these passages. If you've been here a while, you've probably heard me characterize, y'all know the priestly blessing, the Aaronic blessing. You probably heard me characterize it as a statement of not only loyalty to the king, but also of him, of the king, receiving his people into his service. And when you look at, the passage, it says, Adonai bless you and keep you. Adonai make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. Adonai turn his face toward you and grant you shalom. To bless means what? Has another meaning besides blessing, that it also means to kneel or to cause someone to bow. That's often why when you see somebody say Baruch atah Adonai, you'll see them bend the knee and bow, because that is what it is referring to. It is bending the knee to him. And to keep means to guard or to take responsibility for, to oversee, to take under their care and under their sovereignty. And so we bend the knee before our king and enter into his service, and he becomes our sovereign, and we pledge our loyalty to him. And so we're able to come into his presence as a servant of the king, his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. No one is supposed to be able to see his face and live, right? But when we have come under his care, when we have come under his protection, his guardianship, he can turn his face toward us and it doesn't wipe us out. As a servant of the king, we come before him and we rest in his glory and the splendor of his kingdom, all that glory that he has. He shows us grace. He allows us to live in his presence. And as a trusted and loyal servant, he is going to turn his face toward you, toward your needs and toward your concerns, your requests and your prayers. From the throne, from his seat of authority, he hears our prayer and petition, and then he acts on our behalf. He brings us shalom to whatever they are. In a way, it's reminiscent of Esther. When she risks her life to stand before her king, who was also her husband, right? It says, on the third day, Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the palace. So she is going into the courts of the king, in front of the king's hall. And the king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall, facing the entrance. It says, when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the courtyard, she found favor in his eyes. Are you seeing how that priestly blessing is playing out here? She found favor in his eyes. She found grace in his eyes. So the king held out to Esther the golden scepter in his hand, and Esther approached and touched the top of his scepter. Then said the king to her, what is it, Queen Esther? Whatever your request, even as much as half of the kingdom, it will be given to you. He is turning his face toward her petition, toward her concern. And so the king is here's the petition. He's willing to take responsibility of setting whatever the concern is right. That's our king. As the sovereign, as the one with the power to address and answer our prayer and our concerns. And he brings and gives us peace because he is going to resolve them. And so we thank him. Hello, y'all were supposed to be able to see that with me, but apparently y'all didn't need to. But so we thank him. We give praise and glorify his name. We glorify our king. And we are not supposed to have any other kings beside him. No other loyalties other than him. Because you can only have one Lord. You can only have one king. One alone. Yeshua talked about this in Matthew chapter 6, right? Where he says, no one can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will stick by one and look down on the other. You can't have this divided loyalty. You cannot be faithful to both at the same time. And of course, he was talking about serving God and money, right? Mammon. But it's the same concept. Now, when you think about it in terms of probably what we might have grown up with watching in the movies or reading in stories, when you talk about the medieval era and the knights and all those different types of things, loyal knights who serve only one master and king, they are granted certain privileges, certain rights within the king's domain, within his sovereign territory. One important right or duty, actually, of these knights is when he calls, you show up. And he has the duty of eating from the provisions of the king. The king is providing everything for him. The king is providing the daily bread, so to speak, and so he will be ready to receive the orders. Because, a loyal subject, a loyal knight of the kingdom has a seat at the king's table. Y'all remember King Arthur and his famous round table, right? So the knights would come and they would demonstrate their loyalty by sitting at his table and eating the food that he provides. And your presence at the table was a statement of that loyalty to the king. And it's also a statement from him that he is allowing you to sit there, that he has received, he accepts your service. There's an incident in the scriptures where King Saul, used a seat at his new moon table as a statement or as a test of David's loyalty. In 1 Samuel chapter 20, when David was absent and the seat was empty, did that go over well? Do y'all remember that account? Did it go over well when David did not show up and sit at the king's table? No. He used that as that pretense for wanting to kill him, to justify killing him, because he considered it an act of disloyalty. Paul talked about this as sitting at a table, eating food. He described it in terms of eating food sacrificed to an idol in much the same way as sitting at the king's table. In 1 Corinthians 10, he said, consider physical Israel, those who eat the sacrifices. Right? Aren't they partners in the altar? Right? If you're going to eat from the food that is sacrificed at a pagan altar, it's as if you're sitting down at that king's table. He says, what am I saying then? That an idol sacrifice is anything, or that an idol is anything? No, he knows those things are not real, not other gods. He says, no, I'm saying that what the pagans sacrifice to is to demons and not to God. And I don't want you to become partners with demons. I don't want you to sit at the table of another king, certainly that is not really another king, that certainly is not another God. But I don't want you to sit at their table so that there's any confusion. He says, you cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake in the table of the Lord and the table of demons. So he's talking about that loyalty. Because the demonic wants you to share their table. The demonic wants you to eat their food, and they find sneaky ways to get you to do it. Right? How many of y'all have, and we just discussed this earlier this week, you eat at a restaurant or something for years and years and years, and all of a sudden, if you're not eating pork, all of a sudden you find out that they've been putting pork in that the whole time. Anybody have that happen? Hate it when that happens. You got me again. I don't want to sit at your table. We're not supposed to sit or share at more than one king's table. We must have only one king, one alone. And so, in order to be loyal servants of the king, there's a lot in this portion that's like that. But what does it mean to be a loyal subject of the king? Now, most of us, when you're talking about the knights and the medieval periods and stuff, y'all know what the concepts about chivalry is, right? Y'all have heard about that, how that's supposed to control or direct their conduct. It's that knightly system with it has a religious element, a moral element, a social code, and this combination of qualities is expected to be this ideal knight is courage, it's honor, it's courtesy, justice, readiness to help the weak, all those kinds of things. And so while there were some universal concepts that what proper knightly behavior in chivalry was supposed to be, it also depended upon which king you were under, whom the knight had pledged his loyalty and service to, because each king would have certain expectations and priorities and measures of what a faithful servant was going to be. And they might be a little bit different from what the other guy does. He says, no, one king says, I'll let you do this, and another one says, no, I'm not going to let you do that. So this Torah portion reads, in many ways, and at many points, almost like a blueprint of what it means to be a loyal citizen, subject, or a knight of the king. The Ten Commandments are in this passage, repeated here in chapter 5. It's his Torah, his instruction. And this code of chivalry, if we have bowed the knee to our king, and he has actually received us into his service, then there is a way of life, a code of chivalry that our king expects of his people. So first, in Deuteronomy 4, you follow only the king's command as you go, and you extend his rule and his reign, his way of life. He says, now, O Israel, listen to the statutes and ordinances that I'm teaching you to do, so that you may live and go in and possess the land that Adonai, the God of your fathers, is giving you. Right? Think about it like that. The king has given his code of conduct for his people, and they're supposed to go in to that promised land that has been bequeathed to them, that is their territory, that they are supposed to rule in his place, or in as a servant of him. They're supposed to go in and make his Torah, make his instruction, make his law the law of that land. That makes sense? Y'all with me? And they have to do it as he said it. God has given his instruction, his Torah, to Moses, who in turn teaches it to them, and they don't get to pick and choose which ones they do or which ones they don't. Change the ones that they do or don't. He says, you must not add to the word that I'm commanding you or take away from it, in order to keep the mitzvot of Adonai your God that I am commanding you. You don't get to add rules or exceptions or workarounds. You don't get to take away, discount, or dismiss your obligations just because you don't happen to like that particular one. His code of chivalry for his loyal subjects are not just arbitrary suggestions or guidelines for you to select like a menu. Only the king has the authority to give you the command. Only the king has the authority to make changes to his command, like when you show up, the days or the feast days. Only the king gets to say and designate who your combatants are, your enemies are, who you're supposed to fight. The king can even say, if you're going to be my servant, you have to wear certain uniforms or clothes or identifiers and things that you wear, or even what food gets served at his table. Right? So to disregard his laws and his ways, to disregard and dismiss his code of honor, is to reject the king's authority. And you're not really being a loyal subject to your king. You're essentially renouncing your oath, that oath that you took. That's when in the Robin Hood language, when he was out there in the wilderness, he was called what? What kind of citizen was he? Was he an outlaw? Right? He was outside the law. He was trying to live outside the rule, outside the sovereignty of the king. in the scriptures, that's called being a lawless. You know, the anomia word, where there's no code of chivalry to live by and no sovereign to hold you accountable. Now remember, to be lawless in the way that the scriptures talk about it, being without the law, without the Torah, means that you're going to have another law, another Torah other than the rightful king, another code of chivalry other than the true and rightful king. You know, his enemy, when we read about him in the New Testament, is called the man of lawlessness, because he rejects the king's Torah. He rejects the king's authority. He wants to establish and set up his own authority, his own kingdom. And if we reject the king's instruction and we just do our own thing, it's as if we are claiming to have another master. It's as if we are, you know, pulling out the chair and sitting down at another king's table. You're eating his food instead of your king. Is that a problem to do that? Being lawless, being Torah-less without the king's Torah is denying your loyalty. And Yeshua said to those that are lawless, he said, "Depart from me, for I never knew you, you workers of lawlessness." See, God's people, if you are one of his redeemed people, you have taken an oath of loyalty to serve only him. Deuteronomy 4:10 says, "The day that you stood before," this is Moses recounting the history, "the day that you stood before Adonai your God in Horeb, Adonai said to me, gather the people to me, and I will make them hear my word, so that they learn to fear me all the days that they live on the earth, and so that they teach their children." It says, "You came near and stood at the bottom of the mountain, while the mountain was blazing with fire up to the heart of the heavens, darkness, cloud, and fog." It says, "Adonai spoke to you from the midst of the fire. The sound of words you heard, but a form you did not see, only a voice. He declared to you his covenant, which he commanded you to do, the 10 words, and he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone." So he is saying, I am laying out who I am and who, if you're going to be my loyal subject, this is it. And are you going to agree to it? What's interesting, you know, in the Aramaic, you know, we've been looking at that the last couple of years. In the Targums, when he says he wrote them on the tablets of stone, they are described as being written on another kind of tablet, and it plays into themes and ideas that show up later in the scriptures. See if you recognize where this might come up. Deuteronomy 6 in the Targum Jonathan, it says, "And let these words which I command you this day be written upon the tables or the tablets of" where? Where does that show up later? Anybody? Isn't it Ezekiel and Jeremiah? Right? In the language of the new covenant, in the language of receiving a new heart, where the heart of stone that we may have is removed, and he gives us a heart of flesh. Right? So there were always the set of tablets of stone that Moses was carrying, but you have another set right in here, and his word is supposed to be written here. And it's always been that way. You know, he declared his commands, he declared his authority, and his people stood at the foot of the mountain, which is essentially the base of his throne, right? Because the earth is supposed to be the Lord's what? His footstool, right? So they are standing at the base of his throne, and they declared their oath in response to him. Moses was referring back to what happened in Exodus 19. It says, "Now then, if you listen closely to my voice and keep my covenant," so that's faith, "and your actions, You listen closely to my voice and keep my covenant, then you will be my own treasure from among all the people, for all the earth is mine. Those are the benefits. So as for you, you will be to me a kingdom of Kohanim and a holy nation. These are the words which you are to speak to Bnei Israel. And so Moses went, called for the elders of the people, and put before them all these words that Adonai had commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, everything that Adonai has spoken we will do. Let's say that together. Everything that Adonai has spoken we will do. Hopefully you've said that in the past. Moses reported the words of the people to Adonai, because what they are doing is they are agreeing. They are taking an oath of loyalty. You know, God's voice is what's coming from the top of Mount Sinai, from the cloud, from the smoke. You know, he is speaking from his throne, his seat of authority, because the earth is his footstool. He is laying out the terms of being a faithful citizen, a faithful knight in his kingdom. He's laying out the benefits. He will take charge over them. He will treasure them. He will guard them, and they will serve him as a kingdom of priests. They will serve him as a holy nation to represent and expand his territory, his influence in a world where the enemy has set up a whole lot of dominions and authorities. There are so many other kings, there are so many other authorities that you could serve, or that if you're not serving him, you are serving them. Right? If you're not serving the God of the universe, the creator, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then you are sitting at the table with the demon. So it's important to know who your king is and who is the one who's speaking to you. So it's God's voice. You know, in Jewish thinking, God's voice, what's heard on earth, comes from the mouth of the Memra, from the Word. In this passage, Exodus 19, in the Targum it says, and now if you will truly hearken to my word, to my Memra, listen to him, listen to the Word, and keep my covenant, you shall be more beloved before me than all the peoples of the face of the earth, and before me you shall be crowned kings and sanctified priests and a holy nation, a holy people. These are the words thou shalt speak to the sons of Israel. Again, the Memra, if it's just as a reminder, when the spiritual heavenly God who is in his on the throne in the heavens wants to act in this physical world, this is how the first century Jewish people understood it. He does it through the agency for the work of the Word, the Memra, and that was connected to Messiah. He is the visible of the invisible God. You remember this part of Passover. We use this. We're reminded by Moses that it was the Lord himself who redeemed the children of Israel. Y'all remember this part? And Adonai brought us out of Egypt with a strong hand and a stretched out arm, with great terror, signs and wonders. The next page of that says, for that night I will pass through the land of Egypt, and the response is, I and not an angel. And kill all the firstborn of the land of Egypt. He says, I and not a seraph. Goes on, he says, I and not a messenger. I myself and none other. He alone is their Redeemer. And yet when you look at, again, first century Jewish thought through these Targums, when they talk about redemption from Egypt by the hand of Adonai, it was the Memra that does it. Deuteronomy 4, for you hath the Memra, the word of the Lord, taken for his portion, and have brought you out from the iron furnace of Mitzrayim, to be unto him a people of inheritance as at this day. The Memra took them for his portion. The Memra that brings them out of Egypt. It's the Word, it's the Memra, it's the Messiah who redeems them. He is acting in that role. He can't just be an ordinary person. He can't just be an angel or a seraph. It can only be I and no other. The memra is Adonai acting on earth. Otherwise, all that Passover liturgy we've been looking at is wrong. What they passed on to generations is wrong, but it's not. As the scripture says in Deuteronomy 6, verse 20, when thy son in times to come shall ask thee, which is very similar language to what we see in the Passover with the 4 questions and such, saying, what are the testimonies, statutes, and judgments which the Lord our God hath commanded you? Then shall you say to your sons, we were servants to Pharaoh in Mitzrayim, in Egypt. We were sitting, we had to not really even sit at Pharaoh's table, but we were under his rule and under his authority. He was our sovereign. He was our king, right? And it is the memra of the Lord, the word of the Lord, the Messiah of the Lord that brought us out of Mitzrayim with a mighty hand. And the word of the Lord wrought signs, great wonders, sore plagues upon Mitzrayim and on Pharaoh and all the men of his house, which our eyes beheld. The memra was the agent of their redemption. The word took them from this evil king, rescued them, and brought them to a new king and a new kingdom. That's Colossians chapter 1, that he rescued us from the domain of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son whom he loves. In him we have redemption, the release of our sins, the throwing away, the giving away, that redeemed by the work of the word, the memra, from a greater enemy than Egypt, even from sin and death itself, from the evil one, the kingdom of darkness, rescued to live under a new king and his kingdom and his ways. And that one at Mount Sinai, where he is revealing the covenant and speaking from the fire, again, Adonai's voice from the fire is equated to, it's the same as the memra. We've looked at this passage already, but this is what it looks like in the Aramaic. For the word of the Lord, the memra of the Lord your God, is a consuming fire. The jealous God is a fire, and he avengeth himself in jealousy. Usually we say that's Adonai who is a consuming fire, but it's the memra is the one that is working. It's the word that is doing all these things. The memra is also their king who sits on the throne, high and exalted, using a language that's very similar to Isaiah chapter 6. Again, this is first century thinking. He says, for what people so great, to whom the Lord is so nigh, so near, in the name of the word of the Lord, in the name of the memra of the Lord. But the custom of other nations, this is a little extra commentary, the custom of other nations is to carry their gods upon their shoulders, that they may seem to be near to them, but they cannot hear with their ears, be they near, be they nigh, or be they afar off. But the word of the Lord sitteth upon his throne, high and lifted up. The memra is sitting upon the throne, high and lifted up, and heareth our prayer, what time we pray before him, and make of our petitions. So the idolaters, those who serve other kings, who have other gods, they have to pretend that their God is near to them, and so they carry them around. They either, like you'll see in movies and things, where they'll have small little idols that they can carry around in their pockets with them or in a bag, their God, so they can have their God, so they can set them up and pray to them. Or they'll carry them around on the poles on a litter, where they're acting like they're carrying around a king. They have to pretend that their God is near and carry them around and keep them near. Otherwise, if they don't have that, then their God is not going to listen to them. Their God is not going to hear their prayers at all. But it is the memra, it is the Word who was with God, and the Word was God. In contrast, is able to sit on the throne, high and exalted. And even from that position, he is still able to hear our prayers and our petitions. He heareth our prayer, what time we pray before him and make our petitions. He is near to us, to those who call upon him. Nothing can separate us from the love of Messiah, nor diminish his rule and his authority. That's why the Targum ends. This one is an amazing thing. In Numbers chapter 6 in the Aramaic, how it ends the priestly blessing in Numbers 6, where we were reading this a little earlier, where it says, where the Lord lift up his countenance upon thee in thy prayer, and grant thee peace in thy end. And listen to how this ends. And they shall bestow this benediction of my name upon the children of Israel. And I, by my memra, by my word, through my word, will bless them. Benediction means, essentially broken down is like a good word. He is speaking good over them. He is blessing them. That's what we do with the little ones, the children, when they come up. We are speaking good over them. And Adonai has always intended to bless his people through the actions, through the agency, through the work of the Messiah, the Word made flesh. Because he is our King. And we must know our King, because it is through his name, that name above all names, that we are blessed, that we find peace. And so our King, what makes our King so different, the memra was willing, rather than be carried around like an object in their pocket, or a stone or wood piece that's carried around like some human. Instead, our King stepped off the throne and walked among his people. He was there in that place, in that position of power and authority, rightfully so. Because who, though existing in the form of God, did not consider being equal to God as thing to be grasped, to be held onto, to be protected as if it is nothing can come near him. But he emptied himself, taking on the form of a slave, becoming the likeness of men, and being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself, becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Because for this reason, God highly exalted him and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Yeshua every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue profess that Yeshua the Messiah is Lord, that he is the King. He is King Messiah, to the glory of God the Father. And Israel, even here at Mount Sinai, when they were pledging themselves, taking this oath of loyalty to the King, to King Messiah, they were looking forward to this kind of coming, and they still do. It's when we know who our King is that we begin to understand how we should live, and what he has called us to live, how he has called us to live as his people. And so we emphasize the call to remember the covenant, the Torah, the terms of our service, that code of service. We lay out the commandments that detail the way of life for his people. Deuteronomy 5 says, you are to walk in all the way that Adonai your God has commanded you, so that you may live, and it may be well with you, and you may prolong your days in the land that you will possess. You want to live in blessing under his sovereignty, under his rule, and under his care. as a loyal citizen, a subject. This is how we live. Or as Paul put it in Colossians chapter 1 when he was praying for even a number of Gentiles in these communities, these cities all around the Mediterranean. In Colossians, he says, "For this reason also, ever since we heard about you, we've not stopped praying for you. We keep asking God that you might be filled with the knowledge of His will in all wisdom and spiritual understanding." And where do we learn about the knowledge of His will and the way that He wants us to live? Through His Word, right? Through His Torah. We learn the knowledge of His will best in that manner. And the purpose of that learning, the purpose of that growing and being filled with the knowledge of His will is so that we can be faithful, essentially knights or in His kingdom, living by that code. Because verse 10 says, filled with all wisdom and spiritual understanding in order to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord. The way that we walk, the manner in which we serve Him reflects upon who? Doesn't the way we serve Him reflects upon Him? If we tarnish our own reputation, does that not tarnish His as well? Does that not make Him look bad? Is that not taking His name in vain? To walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, to please Him in all respects, bearing fruit in every good work, and growing in the knowledge of God. Walking daily in His ways, that actually helps us know Him better. We come to know Him more by walking in His ways. And given Yeshua's words to the lawless, that He never knew them because they were without His word, without His Torah, without keeping those things, it also in some ways means that that's how He knows our hearts. That's how He knows us. This is how He learns and sees evidence of our heart of faith, of our loyalty to the King, whether or not we really have only one God or not. That's how He sees it in us. You know, Yeshua talked about He did not give Himself over to men because He knows their hearts. He knows the hearts of men. Well, He knows our hearts by how we live and how we walk, which is why the Shema in a statement is a statement of loyalty to our King. You know, that statement of faith, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." There's other ways that I've seen it translated. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone." We have only one God. We have only one King. We have only one sovereign. And so He is His ways, His rules, His code. That's how we are supposed to live at all times, in every place we go. And we are expanding His rule and His sovereignty here, and where we go and where we work and how we live. His sovereignty is supposed to be over all of that. And so that is how we demonstrate that we love our God. If you love me, you will do what? Obey or keep my commandments. We love our God, our King, our Messiah with all our heart, soul, and strength. And so the Torah, that way of life, is to be right here. And it's only meant for a redeemed people. Only for those who have called upon His name, have been received into His service. He doesn't expect people who are not His, who are not redeemed. They can't really live this way because they are actually sitting at another table with another king. They may not even realize it. It is only meant for a redeemed people. And with that, be assured that our King is on his throne. Be assured that he hears our prayer. Be assured that he is safeguarding and guarding over you. He is receiving you into his service, and that he is acting on behalf of his people. And be assured that this world and everyone will soon see the King on the throne in Jerusalem. Amen.